Good evening, and welcome to Congressman Brad Schneider's live telephone town hall. I'm Jake, Congressman Schneider's Deputy Chief of Staff, and I will be your moderator for tonight's call. In a moment, I'll turn the phone over to Congressman Schneider on what is happening in Washington, including his response to recent actions by the Trump administration. But first, I want to explain the format for tonight's call. Tonight's call offers simultaneous Spanish interpretation. To listen in Spanish, please press *0. Para Español, oprima estrella 0. You are currently in listen-only mode, which means you can hear us, but we cannot hear you. At any time, if you would like to ask a question, just press *3 on your telephone keypad, and you'll be connected with a staff person who will take your question and get you in line to speak directly with Congressman Schneider. We'd like to get through as many of your questions as possible during this call, so we have to limit participants to only one question each. We are expecting a lot of callers tonight, so we are going to keep this call going until 8 p.m. so we can take as many questions as possible. Pressing *3 right now is all you need to do to ask your question. We can take questions from the Spanish interpretation line as well. Additionally, if you have a problem with the federal government, such as Social Security benefits, Medicare, or VA, we can help you get in touch with a caseworker in our district office. We have caseworkers available who speak Spanish too. Just press *3 to be connected and ask press *3 to be connected and ask for help from a caseworker. And now I'm going to turn it over to Congressman Schneider.
Thanks, Jake. Good evening, everyone. I want to thank you all for joining me tonight. I look forward to having a wonderful conversation. I know we have a lot of people on the call, so I'll try to keep my answers succinct, and I will apologize in advance. We will probably not get to everyone's questions, but we'll take as many as we can. Again, just to reiterate, if you have a question, press *3 to be connected with a member of my team and add it to the queue. Again, it's *3 or on the Spanish line, estrella 0. The earlier you get in line, obviously, the quicker we will have a chance to get to you. It's hard to believe that we're only at the start of week 4 of this new administration. Indeed, it's really easy to lose track of time, as every day, just like today, seems to have what feels like a week's worth of news. From the deluge of executive orders to the appointment of, to put it mildly, concerning cabinet nominees, from the havoc being wreaked across multiple government agencies by Elon Musk and his minions, to the on-again, off-again tariffs, the chaos, confusion, and potential crises are almost overwhelming. And maybe that's the point. So tonight, I want to share what I think you should know, how the Trump administration's actions are going to directly impact our district, Illinois' 10th district, you as individuals, your pocketbook, and our communities. But before I get into that, I want to level set and take a step back. I believe the voters of the district, 10th district, elected me because you want to see progress in action to secure 3 big things. Number 1, a growing economy that works for everyone, where working families can not only make ends meet, but can get ahead. Second, a nation with healthy and safe communities, where all Americans feel safe in their homes, on the way to work and to play, where we all have quality, affordable health care, and where our schools are educating our kids to succeed in the 21st century. And third, a strong national security and national defense, where we are protecting and advancing our national interests here at home and around the world. Put simply, it's economy, community, security. These are the 3 pillars that drive what I do in Congress each and every day. And I'll give you a couple examples. To make our economy grow and remain prosperous, I'm focused on lowering costs and raising the standard of living for hardworking American families. I want to create an abundance of new, highly skilled, well-paying jobs. And I want to keep the promise of a secure and dignified retirement for all Americans. To make our communities healthy and safe, I'm focused on relieving the housing crisis by expanding the supply of quality, affordable homes. I want to keep communities free from crime, violence, and decline. And I want to ensure access to quality, affordable health care from providers people trust, where and when they need the care. To strengthen our national security and defense, I'm focused on modernizing our defense, diplomatic, and development capabilities and capacities to protect and advance American interests. Improving border security and fixing our outdated and broken immigration laws to protect all American citizens while continuing to build and grow our great nation. And smartly responding to a changing climate with investments in clean new energies and infrastructure resilience. This is a sample of the platform that I think we can all likely agree on. Whether you're a Democrat, Republican, Independent, whatever your political beliefs, I know that what unites us is greater than what divides us. I think there are so many things that we can agree on as we look for common ground to promote the common good. In the words of the great Abraham Lincoln, we should have a government of the people, by the people, and most importantly, for the people, where we are always looking to make our government more responsive to the people and more effective and more efficient, where we have no sacred cows and consider all options, where we work together in collaboration, foster real compromise, and make true progress towards that more perfect union. Public service, I believe, is a sacred trust, not an opportunity for seeking one's own personal gain or pursuing one's own personal vendettas. If you've been to past town halls, you've probably heard me say that I play on 3 teams. Number 1 is Team USA. Second, then, is Team Congress, protecting the prerogatives established in the Constitution. And only then 3 is Team Red versus Blue. My intent is always to put the interests of our country first and to jealously protect the constitutional prerogatives defined in the Constitution. So I'm hopeful that with time, the Republicans who hold the power in Washington, and remember, Republicans control all 3 branches of government, including majorities in both the House and Senate. I'm hopeful that Republicans in Congress will extend their hands to Democrats so we can work together to achieve big things for our economy, for our communities, and for our security. All things that will help bring about more prosperity for everyone in our communities, irrespective of party, religion, national origin, or sexual orientation. As I've always said, I'll work with anyone, Democrat or Republican, to advance common sense policies to put money back in your wallet, help your kids get an education that secures them a prosperous future, and keeps our nation safe and secure. So with that, before I move into questions, let me ask you all a question first. We're going to do something a little different and start with our first poll question of the night. I'll ask the questions, and I'll give you the options. It's press 1, 2, or 3 on your phone. The question I want to ask you is, how do you hope the 119th Congress will operate? Press 1 if you say, I want the Republicans to always follow President Trump's agenda and totally exclude Democrats. Press 2 if you want Democrats to resist President Trump at every single turn. Or press 3 if you want Republicans and Democrats to work together to find common ground. Again, 1, Republicans to follow President Trump's agenda to the exclusion of Democrats. 2, if Democrats should resist President Trump at every single turn. Or 3, if you want Republicans and Democrats to work together. All right, so let me get back to what's going on. The past 3 weeks, unfortunately, much of the action we've seen from the Trump administration is not meaningfully sought to advance the 3 big things I just mentioned: economic growth and prosperity, healthy and safe communities, and strong national security and defense. I'll start with what I've perhaps gotten to the most calls about, perhaps more than any other issue in the 10 years I've been in Congress. And that's Elon Musk getting access to your sensitive Social Security, tax, and medical information. Under the guise of his Department of Government Efficiency, Elon Musk, who wasn't elected by the people, who hasn't been confirmed by the Senate, and hasn't passed a background check or isn't constrained by any of the rules that would apply to any other government employee when accessing private, personal, confidential information, he now has access to the Treasury payment system and many other systems in our government. This means that Musk and a handful of his minions, unvetted individuals in their early 20s, in fact, one's only 19, with no previous government experience, now may have your Social Security number, your bank routing and account numbers, your tax information, even your healthcare data. This invasion of privacy is outrageous, as so many people have called or written to tell me. Throughout the week, I've sought out Republican colleagues to call out this egregious behavior, urging them to help us protect their constituents' private data and stop Musk. On Friday, I joined my colleagues, Sean Casten and Haley Stevens, and other Democrats to introduce the Taxpayer Data Protection Act, which would ensure only vetted public servants have access to Treasury Department's most sensitive systems. We only need 3 Republicans to join our effort. And if we can get 3, we can pass this bill to keep your data safe. And it's not just the Treasury data. Elon Musk has been on the rampage on USAID. He's going after the Education Department. The list goes on. Now, don't get me wrong. There's absolutely work we need to do to make our government more efficient and effective. I am happy to work with anyone to make that happen, but not at the cost of your safety, health, or your bank account information. So before I go to questions, one more big story from the past few weeks. That relates to the president's tariff threat. If you remember, 2 Sundays ago, the president moved forward with tariffs, 25% across the board tariffs on our two most important trading partners, Mexico and Canada, as well as 10% on China. The tariffs were said to be combating the flow of fentanyl, but only 0.2% of fentanyl seized last year was taken out of the northern border. Canada is not a major source of fentanyl. In fact, most fentanyl comes in through the borders at traditional crossing points brought in by U.S. citizens. Not a surprise, the next day the stock market tanked, and by the end of the day, the president had paused the tariffs against both Mexico and Canada. Now, tariffs have an important role to play. They are a tool to help us advance our interests, to protect American companies, and make sure it's a level playing field. But the way he is doing it in a blanket way is not the way it should be done. And the same, I think, can be said about what the president's doing in targeting communities with immigration raids. We all want to make sure that criminals, gang members, drug dealers, etc., are out of our communities, and if they're in the country illegally, they should be taken out of the country and sent to their home countries. But what the president's been doing has been targeting people to create fear, and doing this across many other areas of the government. That's why it's so important that we continue to speak up and speak out, which is what I will continue to do. So again, I want to thank everyone for joining us. Jake, I'm going to turn it over to you, and let's get the first question.
Sure, I'm happy to give the poll results first, and then we can go to our first question. Just a reminder, the first question of the night: how do you hope the 119th Congress will operate? We had thousands of votes in this poll. The results were 2% said, I want Republicans to always follow President Trump's agenda and totally exclude Democrats. 35% said, I want Democrats to resist President Trump at every turn. 63% said, I want Republicans and Democrats to work together to find common ground. All right, back to you, Congressman, for our first question.
Thanks, Jake, and I'm going to put my own there. I would be number 3. I will continue to look for common ground, but I will continue to fight what I think is undermining our democracy, undercutting our Constitution. I will do all I can to uphold the rule of law. So the first question tonight, let's go to Chris from Northbrook. Chris, how are you? Chris, can you hear me? I'll do one more try. Chris from Northbrook, are you there?
Is that me?
That's you. Hi, Chris. How are you?
Hi, it's Cliff, actually, Congressman. Thank you so much for doing this.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Town Hall. And I'd appreciate knowing why Democrats are not pushing back more strongly on all of these attacks on democracy, all of the efforts through executive orders in a more visible way so that people know that you're opposing what the president is doing.
Thank you for the question. I apologize for getting your name wrong. I'll give you 2 sides of the answer, because the first reaction is, to be perfectly honest, I've been on TV more than I've in the last few weeks than I normally am. We have been on the floor. We've been holding press conferences. We're doing everything we can. It's not just me. It's every one of my colleagues. And it's hard to keep pace. As I said in my opening remarks, the massive number of executive orders, proclamations, appointments, etc., overwhelms the news cycle. And I can be talking about an issue today. This afternoon, I can be talking about what the president did, and by the time I'm finished with my sentence, the next news story is that the president just dropped charges against the mayor of New York, and everyone's focused on that. And that's just an explanation. I don't mean that by excuse. The second explanation I'll give you is that the reality of the situation. The Republicans have complete control of the House and the Senate. And in the House, it is absolute. Whoever has the majority has not just the Speaker of the House gavel, but the gavel for every committee and subcommittee. They control the agenda. They control what comes to the floor, who can make an amendment, whether there'll be amendments to bills. So the difference between right now, it's at 217 to 215, so it's a 1-vote majority, but that 1 vote is completely determinative. What we need to be focusing on, and this is what I'm the chair of the New Democrat Coalition, which is 110 moderate Democrats, largest ideological caucus in Congress, and we're actually growing. But what we've been talking about is making sure we continue to always shine a light on what this administration is doing, where they're violating the law, where they're pushing the limits, where the actions they're taking are going to undermine our national interests. A perfect example is talking about USAID, which protects American interests by making sure that failed states don't become havens for terrorists. That states in Africa like PEPFAR, a signature bill, a law signed by President George W. Bush that has saved millions of lives, countless millions of lives, fighting the AIDS epidemic. If we back away from that, we're going to see an immediate rise of AIDS in Africa and then around the world. We need to continue to shine a light. We have developed a strategy. We're going to focus on three specific actions. Number one is legislation. I mentioned the Taxpayer Data Protection Act and the Stopping Abuse of Tariffs Act that was introduced last Friday. We're going to focus on litigation. Lawsuits are being filed across the country. There are cases where members of Congress or Democrats as a whole will join. More likely, will provide amicus brief in supporting of that. And at the end of the day, it really is going to come down to mobilization, making sure that when we show people what the impacts are, they understand what the impacts are, that people stand up, speak out, and make a difference. And we've seen where we've had success. I didn't mention, now 2 weeks ago when the president announced spending freezes across the board, we spoke up. Myself, my colleagues were on TV. We raised the alarm. And within a day, the president withdrew the memo announcing the spending freeze, and we'll continue to do that. So at the end of the day, we're very limited in what we can do, but if we shine that light, if we stay focused with legislation, litigation, and mobilization, we can have an impact. If we can get 3 Republicans on any matter to join us, we can stop the president from undermining our government. So we will continue to also look to find those brave souls who are willing to join us. And I will emphasize, I know there will be people on this call who are on the other side. When there are opportunities to work together, I'm not going to turn my back from that either. So thank you for the question, and I will try to be louder when I'm on TV, but I am there as much as I can. Let's go to Lincolnshire. Susan, how are you?
I appreciate the opportunity. Maybe your answer is going to be some of what you just spoke, but my question was, what if Trump defies the courts? How can the House of Representatives stop him?
It's a great question. I mentioned it. I mentioned, the news. I talked about the president dropping the charges against the mayor of New York. Before that news even sank in, they were reporting that the president is defying the courts, and the vice president saying the courts have no authority to challenge what the president is doing or wants to do, which is contrary to the founding principles of our government. This goes back, I'm not a lawyer, but I did take enough classes and enough history to understand all the way back in Marbury versus Madison and judicial review. We have 3 co-equal branches of government. So I think that the first thing we have to do is remind people that the Constitution established the checks and balances of a legislature, an executive, and a judicial branch. All 3 are equal. None reigns over the other. And we need to hold them to account. At the end of the day, it may also come down to a number of members of Congress finding the courage to stand up and join. I'm not asking Republicans to join with the most progressive Democrats and abandon their principles. I'm asking them. I mentioned the New Democratic Coalition. We're 110 members in the center of our party. If we could find an equal number of Republicans who will join us in the middle and stand for the principles of separation of powers, the Constitution and the rule of law, we can find a way. But it's going to be a real challenge, and we're seeing it already being challenged. And I'm praying that the judges, including the 228 judges that President Biden appointed over the last 4 years, that they will provide a bulwark, if you will, against what this administration is trying to do. Again, thanks for the question. Let's go to Deerfield. Erin, how are you tonight?
Hi, thank you. I'm wondering if you could please talk about how you plan to protect your transgender constituents.
Thank you for the question. And I will tell you, I've had more than a handful of conversations talking to people who are transgender or have a loved one who is transgender, and there's real fear. This administration has decided that they are going to demonize people for who they are, and actually more than demonizing people, they are taking steps to literally erase them from the military, or erase them from schools, etc. So it's not going to be easy. I will continue to stand up and speak out. I will continue to stand shoulder to shoulder with my transgender friends, my transgender allies, colleagues. In fact, this past last year, Delaware elected the first transgender member of Congress, Sarah McBride, who is an incredible, she's going to be an incredible legislator, let alone being just a remarkable, wonderful person who's being attacked by Republicans in the most hateful and despicable way, by some Republicans in the most hateful and despicable way. I think the most important thing I have is my voice, and to make sure I never back away from being loud and being clear that everyone in our country, irrespective of their gender identity, their sexual orientation, where they came from, who they are, every one of us is a citizen of the United States, a part of our community with equal rights and the right to everything any other American has, and we have to defend that. I will, and I know my colleagues, and I hope my friends in the community will continue to speak out against the hateful policies targeting some of the most vulnerable people, especially young people and kids, and we will continue to take those steps. I think back since I've been in Congress, when I first started running, I used to say the one thing where I stood out from the leader of our party at the time, President Obama, was I believed in marriage equality. Today, that's the law of the land. I think we've made progress in that. The House has passed. I helped pass the Equality Act. We need to make that the law of the land. The bottom line is we just need to stand up. We have to stay defiant, and we have to persevere. It's going to be hard, but we are going to. We cannot allow what is being done, was being said, the targeting of trans or any other person. We can't allow that to be normalized, and I will not do so. So thank you for the question. Let me go to Jake, who will bring us to our second poll question.
Thank you, Congressman. And two quick reminders. First, this call is going to 8 p.m. Central Time, so we still have about an hour. And two, if you would like to ask a question, please just press *3, and you'll be in a queue to go ahead and ask your question. Again, that's *3 to ask a question. Okay, now on to poll question number 2. How concerned are you about Elon Musk gaining access to Americans' confidential personal information, like Social Security numbers, banking numbers, tax records, and medical-related information? Press 1 if you are extremely concerned. Press 2 if you are moderately concerned. And press 3 if you are not concerned at all. Again, let me ask that question one more time. How concerned are you about Elon Musk gaining access to Americans' confidential personnel information? Social Security numbers, bank routing and account numbers, tax records, and medical-related information. Press 1 if you are extremely concerned. Press 2 if you are moderately concerned. And press 3 if you are not concerned. All right, Congressman, back to you.
Great. Thanks, Jake. And we're going to go to Bonnie in Lincolnshire. Hi, Bonnie. How are you tonight?
Thank you, Congressman, and thank you for having the call. My question has to do with the preservation of the social safety net for our society, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and also the Affordable Care Act. I think we all know that 75% of the budget consists of these programs collectively, and since there is such an emphasis on cutting $2 trillion, I think, from the budget during this administration, I think there's no way that they can even attempt that without coming after those programs. And So my question is, first, what can we do to stop them and preserve those programs for the most vulnerable members of our society? Plus, just given the fact that there are so many different ways they could do it, even if they just somehow manage to remove the entitlement status so that it could be chipped away through the budgetary process, that would be devastating. And also, just one other side note, I think we need to do a better job at communicating to the general public that the so-called illegal aliens actually do make contributions to payroll taxes and income taxes, and by doing so, they're helping to sustain those fund to keep the programs going, even though they themselves cannot benefit. And maybe people would feel a little differently if they understood the contribution that these people were making and what we would lose if they were gone. So very concerned about
thanks,
that.
Bonnie. All right. Thank you. I'm going to stick to the one question rule. I will promise. I got your question on immigration. I know we'll get another question. I'll answer it that. But let me talk about Social Security because I think that's so important. And, first, at the risk of sounding like a professor, but the civics lesson with Social Security is it's not an entitlement. We all pay into Social Security. It is Social Security insurance. It's a program that was designed, coming up, it'll be 100 years in 2033, but it was designed to make sure that we were providing people in their golden years or retirement years, however you want to call that, the ability to have a secure and dignified retirement. And the people paying it into Social Security throughout their working life. Social Security was at risk of failure when I first entered the workforce in the 1980s. And Congress found a way, working together, Republicans and Democrats, to come up with a program to extend it into their goal was 40 to 50 years. And here we are, we're coming to that time. And it's time for Congress to come together and work across the aisle, hand in hand, Republicans and Democrats, to make sure we're keeping our promise to our seniors and ensuring every American has the ability to have a dignified and secure retirement. As far as what do we do, a couple of things. President Trump has said he is not going to touch Social Security and Medicare. We need to keep him to his word, and we intend to do that. If you remember during the State of the Union a couple of years ago, then President Biden turned to the Republicans, and as they were razzing him, they said, don't touch Social Security and Medicare. They understand how important this is for society, and that if we fail to live up to this promise, the broad impact it's going to have on our communities, on families, on the nation as a whole. So we have to make sure we do that. I'm on the Ways and Means Committee, which has jurisdiction and direct oversight over these programs. And we've been talking about trying to take steps to strengthen these programs. We've had some bipartisan conversations over the years. I'm hopeful we can get back to those conversations. At the same time, though the Republicans in Congress have said they want to protect Social Security, though the president has said he wants to protect Medicare and Social Security, Elon Musk, again, who nobody voted for, never got Senate approval, hasn't been vetted, is out talking about doing making serious changes to every program, including these programs. And that's where, again, we need to make sure that Congress is protecting our responsibilities, but also our prerogatives as a co-equal branch of government. The executive branch, the president and the administration, should be responsible for executing the laws that we pass, implementing the programs that we authorize, spending the funds that we appropriate, we Congress. And I'm hopeful we'll have some, only need 3, but we can have some Republicans who will join us. And I would tell you, I've heard from so many constituents, Bonnie, as you touched on, of what Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid, for that matter, means to them. The difference between being able to stay in their home and not having it at home at all. The difference being able to pay for their medications, to ensure they get the health care, and health care that is literally the difference between having a life of mobility and full activity to being unable to get about or get around. These are our programs and government institutions that have been in place now, in the case of Social Security, for almost 100 years, that make our country better. So this is my plea to everyone to keep sharing your story. So, Bonnie, thank you for the question, and I promise I'll come back to the immigration question before the night's over. Let me go to Northbrook. Mark, how are you?
Okay, how are you, Congressman? Thanks for taking my call.
I'm good, thanks.
So I wanted to express my concern and ask what can be done about Musk and Doge's attack on science and the National Institutes of Health, specifically with regard to the indirect costs and also threats to reduce NSF funding as well. So I was wondering what Congress plans to do about all this.
Again, not to keep repeating myself, of trying to find legislative avenues to protect. It's Congress who authorized, appropriated the funds for the National Institutes of Health. It's not up for the administration to say, oh, we just don't want to do it, and we're going to have that fight. And this is where we have picked up, at least on the Senate side, Susan Collins, a Republican, issued a statement criticizing the threats to cut, as well as we have, that I'm aware of, at least 22 states attorneys general have sued to block the cuts. And the court, my understanding is that today a court stepped in, a federal court, to block the move in those states. But let's talk about NIH for a second. NIH, the National Institutes of Health. And by the way, probably, if not the greatest, one of the greatest champions of NIH in Congress over the years was my predecessor, John Porter. I always like to share, John, when I first got to Congress in 2013, took me under his wing, and it kind of showed me the ropes, even though we were from different parties. And one of the things we talked a lot about was his passion and love for NIH. And when he passed away, it was the turnout from many of the leaders at NIH to pay their last respects was extraordinary. Because he understood doing research, basic science research, into understanding the causes of various diseases, pathways that might provide the cures, saves lives. And if you think where we are today, in 2025, I'll use breast cancer as just one example. Our understanding of breast cancer, that today the majority of women who will be diagnosed with breast cancer have not just a fighting chance, but a better than good chance of beating it and living their full life expectancy. 50 years ago, that didn't exist. And the understanding we've gotten to the genetic differences, the pathways, how different breast cancer is not one type of cancer. There are many differences that are very subtle, but each of those subtleties leads to different treatments that might work better for someone than somebody else, and vice versa, is all because of the work we've been doing with NIH. And that is true for cancer, it's true for Alzheimer's, it's true. You can run down the list of health conditions, and as a country that is getting older, the money we're investing there becomes even more important. So I will continue to fight and defend NIH. I will work to ensure that the programs they have in place continue. The research doesn't end. Again, this research, if you stop it today, don't just pick it up 3 months from today from where it left off. You have to start all the way back at the beginning because you've lost those clinical trials, et cetera. And I am very hopeful in the same way John Porter, a Republican, and Brad Schneider, a Democrat from the north suburbs of Chicago, are passionate, or were passionate supporters of NIH. I'm hoping we can find some Republicans who will join us in that. So thank you. And again, it's just another example of what we're defending. I'm going to head up to Lake Villa. Randy, how are you tonight? Randy, if you can hear me in Lake Villa, the microphone is yours.
Yes, I can hear you.
Hello? Great. How are you?
Yes. I have a twofold question. On November 5th, there was a mandate by over 75 million people to elect President Trump. And along with that, there was a couple of things that people really wanted to, their concerns was money spent, the budget, and also the border. As regards to the budget, we're $35 trillion in the hole. And now that we're looking through all these government agencies for waste, and they're finding some, I'm not real happy or concerned about Elon Musk, but I am more concerned about them finding waste within different agencies, one being USAID, which all these minor things, $1 million here, $1 million there. I spent a week in North Carolina, and there are victims down there from the hurricane 4 months ago that are still living in tents, don't have any money. FEMA has not been forthcoming in helping them, and I believe some of that money would have been well spent to be sent to places that were hurricane ravaged. My second quick question regarding the border. Anybody that crosses that border without the normal way of doing it is illegal. So they are illegal if they've come across that any border just walking across. They are committing a crime. And I'm also concerned about fentanyl because it touched my family. And I'm concerned that people that have brought fentanyl to our area here has been traced back to coming across the border. And I have documentation because I've been following that since it's touched my family. So with those two questions, I'd like to respond.
Randy, thanks, and I'm sorry for the fentanyl. Fentanyl is a scourge. I think it's touched almost all of our families in one way or the other, but I'm sorry for that. Randy, I suspect if you and I sat down and had a cup of coffee, we'd probably agree somewhere in the range of 80 to 98%. I agree that President Trump got a mandate on November 5th. I might disagree with overwhelming. It was net. It was about a 1.5% difference. So we're still a divided country. But President Trump won the election, and he should have the chance to lead the nation. And I would like to see him lead the nation by bringing us together rather than pulling us apart. And I think we can all agree. I'll touch on government. I remember 1992 when President Clinton was elected, and he assigned Al Gore to look at finding efficiencies and making sure that government was working effectively. We should be doing that all of the time. And I don't believe, I said this earlier, I don't believe in sacred cows. A program may have been in place for a really long time, but if it's no longer serving its purpose or no longer providing a return on the investment, we should be considering better ways to spend our money or achieve our goals. And that should be an ongoing, thoughtful process. Now, there's a difference between a thoughtful process and just going in and shutting down USAID, and I'll dwell on this for a quick second. We spend less than 1% of our annual budget on foreign aid. USAID is the agency that is primarily responsible for providing that aid around the world. Aid is a piece of, I referenced this a little bit, what I call a three-legged stool. Defense, diplomacy, and development are all parts of our effort of projecting U.S. power, hard power, defense, soft power, diplomacy, and development. And if we are building allies, if we are strengthening governments around the world, keeping our enemies, China and Russia, from gaining access, influence, or even control in countries, helping countries governments stay robust and responsive to its people so they don't become failed states and havens for terrorism. We are reinforcing and therefore having to spend less on defense. So it all goes together. So I could list a handful of things, a long list of things where I think USAID could be doing things more efficiently. I can identify some programs where I wish they weren't doing them at all, and we can sit down and have that conversation. That's different than overnight just saying we're not doing it anymore. We're not going to provide aid to Ukraine. We're not going to provide aid and the services in facilitating aid to the people in Gaza. We're not going to help dealing with crises in Latin America or Africa or name anywhere around the world. So it's not that I disagree with the effort to make our government more efficient. I support that, and I'm willing to work together. It's that's not what they're doing. I think we both agree that we need to lower costs. The last time I looked up eggs on a conversation, I looked up at the local store in Highland Park. They were $3.99, and my wife told me eggs yesterday were $10 for a dozen because of the avian flu that's wiping out entire flocks of hens. I think flocks is the right word, but the fact of the matter is the Centers for Disease Control is the group, the government agency responsible for trying to prevent the spread of those diseases or the next epidemic, whatever the case might be. And Elon Musk is just shutting it down, saying stay at home. So it's how they're doing it. It's not the goals. It's the approach that I take issue with. And on the border, I agree with you. For my entire time here, I've been saying we need to address two issues. One is border security. We should know who's coming into our country, making sure we keep out those who want to do us harm, and those who overstay or shouldn't be here, we need to make sure that they leave when they're supposed to. But we also need to fix our immigration system. Our laws are generations out of date. And so when someone who applies for asylum, rightfully applies for asylum because they are facing persecution or threat of violence, whatever the case might be, it can take them 10 years for their case to be heard because we don't have the resources or the systems in place to address that. Well, then other people who are coming and saying, well, maybe I just am seeking a better future for my family and my kids, but I'll apply for asylum because it takes 10 years. If we could turn that into a system that within a couple of weeks or at most a couple of months could hear a case, rule on the case, and assess who is rightfully applying for asylum and who's not, we would do great progress in reducing the people trying to come in and falsely ask for asylum. So the two things, border security and immigration reform, they go hand in glove. And if we did it together, I know we could get in the House, I'm going to guess at least 300 votes for it. We only need 218, but we can get there. And the last thing I'll touch on, you brought up the budget. I'll correct you only because it's worse than you said. I think we're at now $37 trillion in debt. I do not want to leave my kids. I've been doing this since my kids were in high school. They're now almost 32 and 30. I don't want to leave my kids with 35 or 37 or $50 trillion in debt so they can never get ahead and their country's always going to be in a hole. So we have to address government spending, and we have to make a decision of what are we going to make our priorities and where do we want to spend our money. But we also have to address our tax code and make sure it's estimated that as much as $1 trillion a year is of taxes that are supposed to be paid aren't being paid because people aren't filing their proper tax returns. And a big chunk of that is people at the very top of the income scales. We need to make sure that people are paying their taxes and that we're balancing our budgets and we're putting our kids on a better path. So we can disagree on approach, but I'm guessing on goals we probably agree quite a bit. And maybe someday we'll grab that cup of coffee or come to my next in-person town hall. So thank you for that. I'm going to stay up in the western part of the district. Jennifer from Ingleside, how are you?
I'm well, and I've really enjoyed, good evening. I've really enjoyed your conversation, and I would like to have more of these. I think people really don't understand government. My question really is about government spending, but it is more importantly about the Individuals with Disabilities Act, which is turning 50 here in November of 2025, which serves infants and toddlers, children and youth with developmental delays or disabilities, which is and has been proven to be cost-effective and supportive. Minimally, every dollar spent in early intervention has a return of minimally $7, upwards to $30 to the dollar. We are at risk, and I understand all that you've said and how Congress is Republicanly held. IDEA, or the Individuals with Disabilities Act, has been a bipartisan group. They are gutting the Department of Education, which is responsible for the Individuals with Disabilities Act. We are also being criminalized because of our work towards equity and inclusion and diversity, because people don't really understand what that means. As you stand at a Capitol and you can't get in if you have a wheelchair, that rights of folks to have access to buildings. It's not just about race or sex. This is much bigger. And I'm terrified for this is my career work. I don't care about my job loss or where I do my job, but I don't think people realize that, the taxes that aren't paid by the billionaires could fund all of these with just 1% tax. We're taxed with everything. And I'm concerned that this public law is being demonized when 6 of my colleagues have been put on administrative leave for their work on inclusion, diversity, and equity.
Yeah.
It's terrifying, and I'm concerned that, and I think everyone realizes that they want everyone to resign, and they're going to, undo the government budget, and the amount of money that's spent to support infants and toddlers, children and youth, and their families in our communities, to support our communities, because we don't live in special worlds. Everyone lives together, right? We are a community, right. and we need to protect the laws. It's shocking to me. And there's just so much shock and awe, no one can pay attention, and you mentioned that. I appreciate you saying that, because every day we get another email about something that we're doing or not doing and can't say, and we have work to do. We just want to do our work and support the families that are most vulnerable, my neighbors, your family. And I do appreciate you having this meeting, but can you speak to how you're going to protect laws and budgets and supports that are necessary? Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Well, Jennifer, thank you, and thank you for what you do. I'm actually going to make this very personal for me in a second, but I know how hard the work you do is, and I'm sorry about your colleagues. What I will say is, and this is, I'm just repeating the same mantra. We've got to keep our faith in the ideals and values this country was founded on. We've got to stay defiant against all these attacks and persevere. That is the key thing. You talked about Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA. It has been one of the most significant contributors to the advancement of our country over the last 50 years, and making sure more people have a chance to get the education they need to reach their potential, pursue their dreams, and contribute to our nation. Even having said that, it's never been fully funded, right? I'll tell a personal story, and this is one person's story. My story is probably similar to millions of other people around the country. But my oldest son, who I just asked him if he was on. I don't think he's on this call. But my oldest son, when he was 6 years old in first grade, we were told he was just not performing as he should be in school. We had him tested. He was diagnosed with severe dyslexia. And we were told that he would probably never read and probably never graduate high school. It was a very dire explanation. Now, my wife is the most incredible woman in the world on a lot of levels, but one of the things she is truly a hero for is championing both our sons, being a champion for them. And because of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, because my son was a different kind of learner, but wanted to be included in the school, because he, diversity, equity, and inclusion, he reflected that in his own specific way because of his learning issues. He was able to get the resources he needed. I will jump to the end. The reason my son is probably not on the call is because he's in class tonight. He went on, he graduated high school. He not only graduated high school, he went on to college. After college, he served 5 years in the U.S. Navy as a surface warfare officer, and he's now finishing up a 4-year joint law and public policy degree. Next year, he'll be working for a district judge, federal judge out in Utah. Yes, I'm bragging. I will confess to that. But I'm also pointing out an example of someone who, in a different time, in a different country, would have been cast aside because we believe everyone has a real potential to rise up and overcome obstacles, but make a great contribution. This is a young man who has made his contribution, will continue to make a contribution to his community, to his country. As a country, we have 350 million people, roughly. If you take the populations of India and China, there may be 10 times total population. It means if they educate 1/10 of their kids at honors level, they'll have more honor students, outstanding students, than we will have students to educate at all. We can't afford to leave anyone behind. So the investment we make on individuals who are divergent learners, individuals who may have reading disabilities or speech disabilities or cognitive disabilities that are only allow them to achieve to a certain level, if we give them the potential to reach their full capacity and be parts of society and contribute to society, we can compete and outcompete the likes of China, India, and any other country that wants to challenge us. So, the idea, the act is I think one of the most important things we have. The work our Department of Education does in granting that is vitally important, and the work that folks like you do, we have to be supportive of, not critical of. And so I am going to defend. You may have picked up the passion I have for this. It's been a passion of mine forever. I'm grateful for the chances the system gave to my kids and the kids in my communities. I want to make sure that every kid, not just in our communities in the 10th district, but in our country, have the potential to get the skills and lessons they need to do so. And I will also share, my son said he's not on the call because he's in class, but he says hello. So let me go to Jake for the results from our second poll question, and he'll give us poll question number 3.
Thank you, Congressman. The results to our second poll question, and if you recall, it was, how concerned are you about Elon Musk gaining access to Americans' confidential personal information? Now, this one was a little bit of a lopsided result. 93% said they were extremely concerned, 4% said moderately concerned, and 3% not concerned. All right, for our poll question number 3, it is, how do you think President Trump's tariffs will affect you personally? Press 1 if it won't have much effect. Press 2 if it will have a positive effect. Press 3 if it will slightly raise my cost of living. Press 4 if it will significantly raise my cost of living. Let me read that one more time. How do you think President Trump's tariffs will affect you personally? Press 1 if it won't have much effect. Press 2 if it will have a positive effect. Press 3 if it will slightly raise my cost of living. Press 4 if it will significantly raise my cost of living. Congressman, back to you.
Thanks, Jake, and thanks everyone for first staying on the call. I know we're going to go long because we have so many people who have joined us tonight, and we'll take as many questions as we can. But thank you for staying with us. Corey and Mundelein, how are you tonight?
Hi, Congressman Snyder. I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
So my question was, you've mentioned several times that we only need 3 Republicans to join the Democrats in order to stop Trump. Can you give us some insight into some of the conversations that you and your Republican colleagues have been having? I'm curious how likely you think it is that we see some Republicans start to cross the aisle soon, and what do you think needs to happen in order to see some Republicans willing to do so?
I love the question. I'll answer it and jump around. I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. I think right now the Republican Party, they're fighting amongst themselves. We have a funding deadline. Government runs out of money on March 14th. The Republicans have already made it clear that they're not going to join with Democrats to find a compromise approach to putting the government. They're going to try to do it all by themselves. But so far they keep missing, at least the House keeps missing their own self-appointed deadlines, because they can't agree. So I think there'll be a little more pain before we find them coming back. That said, I continue to have a lot of conversations. As noted earlier, I'm the chair of the New Democrat Coalition. New Dems are these 110 moderate Democrats. We have groups on the Republican side. There's the Republican Governance Group, which is about 40 moderate Republicans. There's the Main Street Coalition, which is about 80, and there's overlap. This isn't a one-to-one ratio, but there's the Main Street Coalition, which focuses on Main Street issues, is their mantra. There's the Republican Study Group, Freedom Caucus, most people know. But in my role as chair of the New Dems, I've been having one-on-one meetings with the chairs of these other groups, talking about how we might work together, just getting to know each other. For example, the Main Street Coalition, I met with the guy, Mike Flood, who I knew who he was, but I never really chatted with him. We met in his office, had a really nice conversation. He's from Nebraska, talked about his family, talked about his background, what his priorities were. I shared some of mine, and we looked for where we can find that common ground. And I've had that with the chairs of the groups, the other groups I've mentioned. I'm also part of the Problem Solvers Caucus. This is about 20 Democrats and 20 Republicans. We were founded. I helped found this group. I was one of the founding members in 2017 during Trump's first term in office. And the idea is that we continue working with each other, talking to each other, no matter how tense the times may be or how difficult the issues we face are, how steep the hill might seem. We're going to keep talking to each other and look for ways to break through the noise and get something done. We are meeting problem solvers. We've had conversations. At the moment, there's not any easy wins that you can point to and say, oh, we can do this, we can do that, we can do the other thing. So right now, I think the important thing is to continue to have those conversations. I'm not asking any of my Republicans to sacrifice their principles or values. I'm not about to sacrifice mine. What I am saying is, as I said at the top of the hour when we started, I'm going to put what I believe the interests of the country are first and foremost, far before the interests, whether it's party or personal. And if we all do that, then we should find a way to work together. The challenge right now is President Trump and the people around him are very intolerant of any differing opinions within their own circles, and they are very vindictive if you disagree. So a lot of my colleagues are just trying to keep their head low. My Republican colleagues are just trying to keep their heads low right now. I think when the outcry from their constituents, when the impact and damage of what's being done becomes clear, when those rise to the fore, then we'll start seeing those changes. So that's what I'm hoping to see. So Corey, thanks for that. Before I go to Mary and Northrop for the next question, let me remind people, if you do have a question, we've got about a half hour left tonight. Press *3 to ask a question, and we'll get you in the queue. Thanks. Mary in Northbrook, how are you?
I'm fine. How are you? Doing all right?
I'm hanging in there.
Yeah,
thank God I have a bottle of water here next to me. My mouth's getting a little bit dry, but I'll let you talk. I'll give a short answer. Go ahead.
Well, you've touched on a bit of the questions that I have. The first was how far will you go to get their attention? Will you let the government shut down? And you mentioned Flood in Nebraska. Would you be willing to send out names of other representatives that you have a working relationship with? Because I know lots of people in Nebraska. I'm willing to help you. I would call his constituents.
Yeah. No, thank you. Well, what I'll tell you is when you see someone on TV talking, just a regular, normal person, wants to be Republican, you think they're a nice guy or a nice woman, you can be pretty certain that I have a fairly good relationship with them. So you know, I got a call today. One of my colleagues, there was an article in the local newspaper, local newspaper that talked about my vision for the New Dems. And it had a picture of me. It wasn't the best picture of me. It was when I had a beard I was growing a beard for the 30 days after my father died, and that picture keeps showing up. But this representative, Virginia Fox, sent me the picture, she cut out the article and sent it to me and said, in case you wanted another copy for your family, which I thought was really nice. And she's someone, she often comes up to me with some legislative ideas. She's pretty far to the right, where we don't agree on a lot of things, but every so often we find something we can work on. That's an example. But I've always said, and I've always tried to teach my kids a couple of things. One, I'll work with anyone as long as they have an open mind, they have ideas they bring to the table, and they're committed to work together to solve the problems we share. And that was true when I was in business, and it's even more so in politics and in Congress. The other thing I often say, and many of you probably heard me say this, is I don't have to prove you wrong to be confident of what I believe, but I'm not so certain of anything I know not to listen to what you have to say. And maybe in the conversation, I'm going to learn things that are going to change either my assumptions or my conclusions. And it's hard to change your conclusions if you draw them from your assumptions. So it's always much better to focus on someone's assumptions and see if you're starting from the same place. So I talk about moderates. Moderates, another one of my sayings is moderates a style, not a position. Moderate says, let me hear what you have to say. Let me hear what's important to you. Let me hear where you're coming from. And maybe in that conversation, we'll have something that we have in common, and we can work together. And again, it's not asking anyone to give up or walk away from the principle. So thanks for the question. I really appreciate it. I'm going to read a question. As I mentioned, we are simulcasting tonight. We have Spanish translation on another line. And I have a question from Rosalia in Waukegan. I hope I said your name right, Rosalia. And so I'll read the English translation that was just handed to me, and we can answer that. But Rosalia asked, I want to know what you think about the families that are under attack from ICE. We have families that have worked here for multiple years and pay taxes, but are now being taken away. What's going to happen? Thank you, Rosalia, for bringing that question. And as I promised earlier, I would talk about this issue and immigration in general. Governor Pritzker has said this in his own way. I've been saying it for a while. We all want our communities to be safe. We want to make sure that drug dealers, gangbangers, common criminals, people who shouldn't be on our streets are taken off our streets, and if they shouldn't be in our country, that they're sent back to their home countries. And I don't think anyone is arguing against that. But what we've seen from the raids, the ICE, the immigration raids, is they haven't been targeting criminals. One of the cases in Waukegan was a grandfather. It was someone who, as I understand, I have some of the details, not necessarily all of them, but as it has been explained to me, this is someone who's been in our community for more than 30 years. He came here as a young man. He's worked in the community. He's paid his taxes. He has a family. He had his own kids, and now his kids are having kids, and he's a grandpa. And 20 years ago, he had a DUI on his record. And because of that, he was arrested. This is someone who's not an immediate threat to our communities. So I wish the administration were focusing on where there are immediate threats. I wish the administration was joining. And I'm telling you, as a Democrat, I'm not alone. Other Democrats would work to improve and enhance our border security, to try to find a way to modernize our immigration laws, that we were focusing on thoughtful ways without marginalizing or demonizing individuals who are from different countries or speak different languages. And as Rosalia's question asked in her question, many of these people have been here for decades, and they are part of their community. They are contributing. They have businesses. They're working in businesses. And it's a consequence of a number of things. And I'm not just blankly dismissing the fact that some of these people either overstayed visa or came in at in between our border crossings, and they need to get right with the law. And that's why we did legislation gosh, now it's 12 years ago, that said we should find a way to allow people to get right with the law, to pay a fine, to get their papers in order, to not go to the front of the line, but to get in line and have a chance to stay in their community. We can talk about the dreamers. People who came here as kids, their family brought them here. They didn't have a choice. Sometimes they're 1, 2, 3 years old, and this is the only place they know. This is every bit as much as their home as it is to your kids or my kids. And how do we help them make their home here, get their education here, and make their contributions to our country and to the world, benefiting our nation? And so, again, I'm going to speak out against the targeting of communities, the fear-mongering. I will be supportive of efforts to secure our borders and fix our immigration laws. And as I've been saying all night, we're going to stand by our values. We're going to be defiant. We're going to persevere. To the families, I know they're afraid, and I don't blame them, but I hope they know that they have a friend in me, and that I will continue to work with colleagues on both sides of our aisle to tackle the issues with immigration, and work with my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to make sure that we're putting the interests of our nation in a way that lifts up all people. So, Rosalia, thank you for the question, and hopefully that didn't get lost in the translation. I'm going to go next to Warren in Ingleside. How are you tonight, Warren?
Congressman.
Hi, how are you?
I'm fine. My question is, how is it that the president has acquired, and it has been happening over multiple years, over multiple presidencies, that they have acquired so much power to do such things with their executive power that Congress has not done anything to put a stop to it? I mean, this has happened since LBJ all the way through Obama, Biden, and even when they did, there wasn't as much pushback as it is being done with Trump. Not to say he's right. So how is it that they have all this, or developed all this power to the point where, as you said, we're supposed to have a three-branch government? It seems like we have maybe 2 or 1 branch government right now.
Yeah. Awesome question. I ask this question every day, and actually, Warren, I think you can go back as far as Roosevelt, and this is where I will fall back on my standard line where I say I'm an engineer, not a historian, so I'm a little bit over my skis. But I've lived long enough that I've lived a lot of history. But we have seen an erosion of the 3 equal branches as defined in the Constitution, certainly my whole life and going back further. And so part of the answer is creep, right? Just slowly, the executive branch has taken a little bit more authority and a little bit more authority. Part of that is because Congress at various times in the last 100 years has been utterly dysfunctional. The last Congress, we're in the 119th Congress now, the 118th, the one that just finished in January, I think is the most inefficient Congress in our nation's history. And had a couple of historical landmarks, the sacking of a Speaker of the House, a couple of shutdowns. I mean, it was a wild ride. But you can think back to the 50s when Congress had its dysfunction. You go back to the 30s and President Franklin Roosevelt having to make significant threats and extracting power. So it's not new. It's reached a crisis point, I think, where we are today. And I would like to find more of my colleagues, and I'm not going to point fingers one side or the other side of the aisle. I think this is both sides of the aisle. I'd like to find more who will stand up and say, stop. We've got to take our prerogatives back. We are not going to let the executive branch, or for that matter, the judicial branch, roll over us like a steamroller. And part of it is it's Congress has the power of the purse. So yes, it is wrong for the president and his lieutenants say we're not going to spend the money on the programs Congress authorized. But it's also right for the public as well as the executive branch to say, Congress, you need to be more responsible in how you're spending and authorizing money. As I was talking before earlier, we can't let our debt grow to $50 trillion. We have to start making hard decisions. And I think if more members of Congress would listen to their constituents, if more constituents would say, you know what, my voice matters, and I'm going to cast my vote. We have, in some cases, members of Congress get elected with 15-20% turnout. And so they're not going to feel the need to be as responsive. So, Warren, I feel like I'm whining more than answering your question. We have to make sure what the founders envisioned in the separation of powers, 3 co-equal branches. We've got to find a way to get back to that. And it's going to take an effort, not just of members of Congress, but public outcry. So maybe it starts with teaching civics in middle school and high school, making sure that our students graduating and inheriting this government demand that they inherit a government that reflects the vision of the founders, the values of those who came after, whether it's running through Abraham Lincoln or Theodore Roosevelt, Dwight Eisenhower, John Kennedy, you can run down the whole list, all who were imperfect in their own way, but all who were committed to try and move our country forward. That's what we should be doing. So as we're getting close to the end, we got about 15 minutes left. Let me go to Jake to read the results of our final poll question. As Jake gets ready to read that, in fact, I might let Jake talk a little bit about it, but this is my commercial. Besides legislating here in Washington, besides doing town halls, we've got an amazing team in Washington. I've got a legislative team that helps with all the policy. At home in our district, we've got a group of people who are there to help deal with any issues you might have with any agency of the federal government. They work day in and day out making a difference in people's lives. So, Jake, you want to do the poll and talk about some of our constituent services?
Happy to, Congressman. Again, just to reiterate what the Congressman said, if you have a problem with federal government agencies like Social Security benefits, Medicare, VA, passports, please call our office between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. Central Time. You'll get somebody live to answer the call and route you to the right person to be able to help. If it's after work hours, it'll go to our voicemail. We'll get back in touch with you right away. But I wanted to make sure you all have that phone number. It's 847-383-4870. Again, do not hesitate to reach out, call. We can either help you or steer you to the right place to be able to help. Again, our website is schneider.house.gov. Again, please call. If we can help, we will. And we'll certainly try to be as helpful as possible. So, again, don't hesitate to reach out if there's anything we can do. All right, now let me read the results to that last poll question, and let me repeat it one more time for folks. The question was, how do you think President Trump's tariffs will affect you personally? First, option 1 won't have much effect. 1% said that it won't have much effect. Option 2, will it have a positive effect? 3% thought that. And number 3, it will slightly raise my cost of living? 6%. And 90% said it will significantly raise my cost of living. Those are the final poll results. We appreciate the more than 1,000 people that participated in these surveys. So really great results there, and appreciate the participation. Okay, back to you, Congressman.
Great. Thanks, Jake. And again, thanks to everyone for answering the questions. It's good to have the two-way thing, and just great questions tonight. I think we have time for 2, if I'm really quick, maybe 3 more questions. So Gloria from Spring Grove, throwing it over to you. How are you tonight?
I'm good. How are you, Congressman?
I'm hanging in there.
Good. I would like to know if federal grant funding that was approved and in process has truly been opened for reimbursement.
Great question. My short quip is so would I. I think the answer is yes. But let me take a step back. The funding freeze in and of itself was egregious. It violated that separation of powers I talked about. These were programs that provide for our kids, even our youngest kids, like Head Start, preschool programs, for seniors, Meals on Wheels. It's programs that supported our first responders, providing for whether it's training for police or fire trucks, you can run down the whole list. It affected almost every aspect of our community. In fact, in our district, there was a $19 million grant, which was not all, but a significant portion of the funding necessary to complete a complete restructure of the road in the Round Lake area, Cedar Lake Road. All of that was put on hold. We think it's now no longer put on hold, but it's still an issue. And I've talked to a lot of government officials. We've talked to our local nonprofits. We actually had a roundtable talking to them to understand the impacts it was going to have on them and the programs they provide, especially our nonprofits. We talked earlier tonight about the horrific impacts of fentanyl. Well, helping people get over addictions and recovery are some of the programs that are funded with government support. Efforts to reduce gun violence, funded with government support. Efforts to help victims of sexual violence and domestic abuse. Again, these are all programs that are helping people, helping our community, and receive in some cases, much of their funding from the federal government. What happened when he made that announcement, the memo came out on Sunday. There was an uproar on Monday. I was on news programs. My colleagues were on news programs. We were highlighting the impact it was going to have. And Trump blinked, same way he blinked with Mexico and Canada. So we'll continue to follow it. Another court today said the administration isn't fully following the order. We need to continue to highlight the impacts and make sure that people see what's happening. So like I said, I didn't mean to be glib about it, Gloria. We need to be focused, getting information, making sure that funding's going out, and where there are gaps in the funding, the quicker we find out about it, the quicker we can respond. And as soon as we find out about it, we will respond. So, all right, let me go to Kelsey from Lake Villa.
Hello, can you hear me?
I hear you. How are you, Kelsey?
Hi, I'm all right. I was actually, I wanted to ask you about a bill that you co-sponsored. I believe it was 9495. It was the one that allows the government, the executive branch, to rescind nonprofit status from certain nonprofits.
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering if, in light of the current Trump administration and, their troubling power grabs, that you would you're rethinking this bill, or maybe would consider withdrawing your support, from a bill that, frankly, I know you made it under a Democratic president, and, you didn't intend for it to be used by someone like Trump, but the reality is that sometimes people like Trump do get into power, and, maybe it would not be best to have a bill that, grants him legitimacy to his attacking of political enemies and makes it easier for him to do so. Not trying to
thank you. No, I appreciate the question. And look, I didn't just co-sponsor. I was the co-author of the bill. This bill originally was H.R. 6408, introduced about a year ago. That bill was passed. Well, what that bill does is, as you mentioned, it would allow the Secretary of the Treasury to suspend, not withdraw, but suspend the tax-exempt status of a nonprofit organization that was providing material support to a terrorist organization. And all of those words were very specifically chosen. They are defined in current law, and the bill did not pass the Senate, so it didn't become law. But there were guardrails in the bill, protections for nonprofit organizations, the right to address it, and it's not what the administration is using to do the many, what I think, awful things it's doing today. That's there. I'll say it this way. Number one is I do believe that a nonprofit organization that receives tax-exempt status basically is given special tax status that effectively is subsidizing the work of that organization, should not retain that tax-exempt status if it's supporting a terrorist organization, not defined by the president. It is defined by existing law, and there are very clear definitions of what terrorism is. That said, this is not a bill that I would consider introducing in this current environment for a number of reasons, but certainly what we're seeing with the Trump administration and the lack of respect of the law. But I'll continue to work to try to protect our communities, to make sure that no organization in the United States that is receiving, whether it's taxpayer funding or anything else, is able to support terrorism of any kind. It is a real threat. We've seen in previous cases, the Holy Land Foundation in Chicago is an example from a number of years ago. This past summer, the Biden administration, Director of National Intelligence, issued a warning about how, and the memo issued in July about how Iran was using nonprofit organizations in the United States to try to undermine U.S. interests. So I will do everything I can to protect our communities. Actually, I forgot one other one is in October, Samadoun had its was sanctioned, specifically sanctioned, a nonprofit organization for supporting terrorism. So it's not a made-up problem. I'll continue to fight the problem. But yes, I am very concerned about what this administration is doing. So I appreciate the question very much. So for the last question, I'm going to go to Chris in Vernon Hills. And thank you. Before you go, warm up. No pressure. You're the last question. It better be good. But I want to thank everyone who stayed on the call tonight. I appreciate the chance to talk. I know we didn't get to everybody's question, but I really appreciate you joining us. So Chris, don't let us down.
Hi.
How are you?
Good evening. I'm fine, Congressman. How are you? Thank you for taking. Good. Thank you for taking my call, and I'll try to keep this brief. I, by nature, am a person who likes compromise, and I agree with you being on the Problem Solvers Caucus and things of that nature, because I think we need both sides to do the job they are assigned to do, and that's work together. However, in the current administration, it concerns me deeply that I don't see an appetite for doing that at the moment. And I worry that efforts to compromise or do anything that we would normally do might fall flat. And I see it as almost like there's a mandate on the other side to put forth things that like we saw in the Project 2025 outline and not listen to any dissent. And my question is there going to be Democratic leadership stepping forward visibly to say we are going to ensure that all citizens are heard and that all voices are heard? And if so, will they be able to tell us what we as individual citizens can do to help? Because I think that's how many things get done, is when average people get involved and make their voices heard, because then I think legislators listen.
Great question. You didn't let us down. It's an awesome question. Thank you. Wow. This is hard because I'm like you. I believe in compromise. I believe I will take, if I can get part of what I want and you can get part of what you want, we can make progress. And I mentioned earlier I was talking to a lot of my Republican colleagues, just building bridges as chair of the New Dems. And I was talking to one who said, look, actually I take it back. This was talking to my Democratic colleague, the chair of the Progressive Caucus. And he said, I'll take, if I get 60% and you get 40%, I can take that. I said, look, here's the beauty of compromise. Because we have common ground, you can get 60% of what you want. I can get 60% of what I want. And technically, you can't have more than 100%, but 60 and 60 is 120. We can actually do more. The whole is greater than the sum of the parts, so to speak. So compromise, you can do great things. And I may not get everything I want today, but if I make progress, then tomorrow I can go back to the table and find new ways to move forward. And as things change, some of the things I didn't get are things I probably am thankful I didn't get in the end anyway. So it is hard for me to say I'm going to turn my back on compromise, and I don't think I will say I'm going to turn my back on compromise. But the other thing, I learned this through a long career in business, and I think it's true in governing as well. You can't negotiate against yourself. You can't negotiate with yourself. So in the House, the leader is Hakeem Jeffries, the minority leader. What I think we're all saying is the Republicans, Speaker Johnson, Mike Johnson, has Hakeem's number. And when they're ready to talk, we're ready to sit down and roll up our sleeves. But what we can't do, and I hope that Democrats don't do, is get anxious. And I mentioned we run out of money. The government runs out of money on March 14th. On March 1st, saying, oh, gosh, we haven't made any progress. Well, we'll offer you this. Come to the table. And then on March 10th, we haven't got anywhere. So we'll offer you this. And each next successive day, the Democrats are negotiating against themselves. My personal opinion is I'll work with the Republicans, but I'm not going to offer anything until they come to us and say, let's sit down and work together. And that's not taking my marbles and going home. That's not sitting in a corner and pouting. That's saying we need to have an adult conversation where we're looking at each other eye to eye, peer to peer. Yes, you have the majority. We accept that. But we have certain things we're going to demand, and you touched on one of them, is the people's voice has to be heard. We need to be addressing the issues for all Americans, not just some. We need to make sure that Congress and the prerogatives of Congress are respected. That should be one of the demands I believe we make, that when Congress says that the executive branch should spend X, Y, or Z on programs A, B, and C, that the executive branch is going to follow the law as it is written by Congress and not try to rewrite or disregard the law. I don't think those are demands out of line. I think those are demands absolutely in line with our Constitution and where we should be. So we'll see how it shakes out. It's going to be a long, bumpy ride, but I do believe that compromise is the best way to go. So with that, we're at the top of the hour. It is 8:59 here, 7:59 at home. So let me just say thank you. And I want to remind folks to go to our website, schneider.house.gov. I should have done this earlier. Sign up for my newsletter. Follow us on Facebook, Blue Sky, Instagram. We didn't get to everyone's questions, but if you write to us, and the best way to do that is from our website, we will answer the questions. We write back. We get thousands of letters every day, every week, not every day, but every week, and we try to get back to people as quickly as we can. Letters are running super, super high, so it's going to take us perhaps a little bit longer than normal, our normal 2 weeks to get back to folks. But again, thanks to everyone. Have a great night, and keep the faith, stay defiant, and persevere. Thanks, everybody.